Everyone is a star child, made of stardust and the infinite potential of the universe. This extraordinary fearless something in each of us clamors for freedom from the bonds of fear, conformity, and an ordinary life. Welcome to Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot, where practical tools and solutions from the intersection of mind-body medicine, science, and spiritual well-being awaken and empower you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Hello, I am your host, Dr. Valen A. Durr, here in the sweet spot, where I have conversations with my guests where we talk about the essential importance of mental wealth, defined as brain health, plus transformative thinking as the doorway to the greatest demonstration of your infinite potential. And joining me today is Dr. Obari Cartman. Hey, Dr. Obari.
Hey, Dr. Ballin.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me today.
Oh, you know what? It is always a pleasure to, have time to have conversations and to, of course, share in the wonderful spirit and wisdom that you are and the healing spirit that you bring to the community and to all of those that you touch. So
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
say what? Absolutely. I appreciate you. And so, just to share a little something with our audience about who you are. It's Dr. Obari Cartman is a father, son, brother, uncle, thinker, writer, therapist, photographer, drummer, and grassroots mental health advocate. He is the current president of the Chicago Association of Black Psychologists. He recently created a male rites of passage curriculum called Manifest that is being implemented in juvenile detention centers, schools, and other community settings. As a consultant, Dr. Cartman facilitates training for adults and workshops with youth about maintaining good mental health, critical analysis of hip hop and media, racial and cultural identity, developing authentic manhood and healthy relationships. Dr. Cartman is currently completing his second book about Black spirituality, which will be released next year. So,
True, true, and true.
Yes. And as I was thinking that when you said, when you were giving us the description of all the many ways that you demonstrate, your infinite potential of the creator, and it said thinker, and I actually would dare to has actually changed that and say thought leader.
Thinker and thought leader. That's interesting. I'll sit on that.
Yeah,
The thing that I don't love about thought leader is the hierarchy of leadership that I like to dispel. I do my own critical analysis, thinking, reflecting, and invite others to join me,
uh-huh.
which feels different than leading them to do it. I think that we should all be our own individual thought leaders for ourselves and the people we influence. So I don't like to assume any positions of hierarchies that don't feel comfortable.
Agreed. And you know what? For me, the idea of hierarchy never entered into my idea or concept of thought leader. For me, I'm really thinking of you as someone who is innovating and
Hmm.
and creating or bringing forth some things that are new and uniquely distinctive and wonderful to you. So that's how I'm characterizing thought leader without the hierarchy.
Well, the followers, you gotta have followers if you're a leader. But I appreciate what you're saying. We're gonna start our podcast with a debate. I love it. Let's do it.
Well, I thought we just shared ideas like we usually do, right?
No, we're not. I am trying to defeat you in a debate. You can share all you want. I'm trying to win.
That's hilarious. Oh boy, I said, this universe is filled with wonderful surprises, is it not? Oh my gosh. So tell us something about you in terms of how you got to you being a psychologist and your training.
Hmm. Um, it's been a very organic journey for me. I like to talk about the process of becoming because I mean, sort of what we were just talking about is for me, part of the work is to remove the layers of supposed expertise that come along with the licenses and the degrees and to give that back to people. I believe that people have infinite potential and have
Hmm.
lots of power and um, innate gifts and geniuses that sometimes get lost in the shuffle of capitalism and the hierarchies of academy. And so I like to talk about my journey in a way that does not make me special, right? I know I'm special. I know, the innovative, all that is true. And I'm very clear that I am a product of several environments that created me that are replicable. And
Hmm.
that's more important to me than distinguishing myself as someone that stands out. Everything that I do, everything that I came into, everything that I'm good at, I can point to one or both of my parents as an inspiration for. Um, and it took me a while to get to this place. I remember young 20s in college, I liked wanting to be cool and special and like innovative. I leaned into that more than I do now. But
Uh-huh.
it took me a while to realize, like, it was music for me at first. I was looking at my playlist, my CD collection at the time, and looking at all the music and saying like, oh, you ain't up on that. You don't know nothing about no, right? And so there's that posturing of like, I got something that you don't got, and
Uh-huh.
then it's just a second look to think at all of these musicians, the artists, Zap Mama, Sweet Honey in the Rock, all the people I was listening to that my friends were. I
Yeah.
just got from my parents. I just was listening. I was driving in the car, and that's what they were playing. And so
Okay.
from that vantage point, just thinking about all these things, the psychology, the healing professions, the drumming, the photography, all of it, I just got. It was just in my house. Cultural perspective. Um, I grew up in a house where we were celebrating Kwanzaa, playing drums and reading, and art and culture was a part of it. My dad was taking me to all of these events, stuff that I'm still doing right now. It's just because my father took me to it. And so that's how I came into it. Like we were in a house that was always about healing and culture. And even when I was in school, I was doing like peer mediator programs and these sort of retreats talking about issues. Like I was always into that. I was like people, I always like listening. I was always fascinated by how people made decisions. And so psychology was kind of an easy fit and been growing in it ever since.
Okay. So if since that's the case, but then you also um didn't start off by going into community psychology, correct?
Yeah, I was always in community. Yeah.
Y-
My undergrad degree was psychology, and then I immediately went into a clinical and community PhD program. So
Right.
I'm
So
yeah.
what I'm saying, but you started off in psychology, but you didn't plan on going into community psychology because that was a process of discovery, right?
Yeah, I remember when I was applying to graduate school, I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. I didn't realize until halfway through the undergrad process that you needed more school. I was like, all right, I'm gonna start working now. And then everyone was like, no, you can't really do much with the bachelor's. And so I
No.
was looking at graduate schools and the clinical community. So people were telling me clinical because that's the broadest degree you could do most with it. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I wanted to have as many options as possible. And so one of the schools that I was applying to had a clinical and community program. And I didn't know what community psychology as a field was. I just liked the word and the idea of community, and that's kind of was part of my orientation. So I clicked that box and got accepted to that program and learned about this whole entire field of community psychology, which is a distinct field in and of itself. So I kind of fell into it in that way, but my leading to it was my groundedness in community organizing and the things that I learned, from my community that drew me to the idea of doing psychology in a way that benefited communities. And so I didn't know what I was getting into, but it fit what I was looking for.
So what is community psychology exactly?
So community psychology as a field was born out of sort of the mainstream clinical perspective where psychology still is very much individual based. You think about therapy or assessments or testings, whatever it is, a lot of it has to do with a one-on-one or maybe a group or maybe a family. But community psychology, the really the basic thought was there were psychologists in the healing profession that were doing individual work and thinking about doing the best therapies, coming up with the best interventions, and then removing people to sort of heal them one at a time, and then putting them back into systems that were broken will lead to a cycling of, just running in place. And so they were thinking about how do we intervene at systems levels, thinking about how people are embedded in communities and school systems and policies and social structures, economic structures. And so it was almost like a sociological lens looking at larger systems and thinking about how to change those systems with individual mental health processes in mind. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like an expanded, like a systems change sociology in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was because I'm thinking to myself and I'm kind of going, yeah, because my undergrad major was sociology. So obviously we
Hmm.
said,
Yeah.
psychology is the individual or sociology is
Yeah.
the community, the organization, this the unit. So if
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
what that unit looks, whatever that unit looks like. And obviously also too with me, especially being a child and adolescent psychiatrist,
Hmm.
um, the idea, as you already mentioned, about taking a child and as I tell parents or whomever brings them to me, you bring your child to me wanting me to fix them,
Hmm.
but then you want to return them to the same environment that they
That's
came
right.
from, and expect them to stay fixed,
Hmm.
which is
Right.
not a workable plan,
Right.
right? The unit and the environment needs to make some adjustments also in order to
Hmm.
be healthy. So, so yeah, so that obviously makes a whole lot of sense, right? Because
Hmm.
the environment is affecting the individual, but the individual is affecting the child,
Hmm.
or in this case, or is affecting the person, whether that's a child
Hmm.
or an adult, right?
Yeah. Right.
So tell me, um what does some of your work look like? What are some of the approaches? Like, I know one of the things that you use is conversations in barbershop talk. And for those who may not know why that works, why don't you share that with us?
So the barbershop idea is really just expanding where healing happens,
Mhm.
taking it outside of the office, not waiting for people to find us and to come, go through whatever process it takes to use insurance or sign up somehow and then find their way into an office to sit and be healed, but to go where people are and to engage them in their natural habitat, right? And think about using the environment as a location of healing to transform spaces where people already are into an opportunity to engage more deeply and to reflect more authentically, and to connect with each other. And so I spend most of my time. I don't have office. I literally don't even have office.
Okay.
So I'm in prisons, juvenile detention centers, high schools a lot, barbershops, community centers, um, which is really important right now because there's a shortage of providers and there are more people looking for therapists. We've done a lot of work to reduce the stigmas, and COVID has exacerbated things, and people are more aware and open, and mental health is more popular now. Um, but we have not developed the workforce to meet the need. And so a lot of therapists that I know right now have waiting lists, and they stopped taking clients a long time ago. And so what's happening in a bottleneck of people looking for services, and then there not being people to go to. I think that we have to be more creative to take healing opportunities into spaces where people already are, into the community. So I spend a lot of time doing that, using art and music and movement and just things that are, I don't even like the word non-traditional because traditional assumes a cultural, you know what I mean, like underpinning. Um, I think that what I do is very much traditional for who we are as Black people, as African people. And we kind of just are trying to get back to the source of things to create ways to maintain balance and to connect and to heal that don't require going outside of your community and or outside of yourself, really, for expertise to have someone fix you in ways that I think that should be embedded in the natural flow for lifestyles.
Well, the other thing too, for me, it's a couple things. One, as a child and adolescent psychiatrist, especially, there's been a shortage for a really long time.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that didn't just start with COVID. Um,
Absolutely.
I think that COVID obviously magnified, exacerbated things greatly,
For sure. Yeah.
and and for what was already an underlying, and I say underlying issue, to me it should have never been underlying, because of the fact of the matter is, I tell people your body can't live without a brain, and while we
Hmm.
inherently understand that, we don't consciously think of it in such a way that we go, oh, if my brain is running everything, then I need to take care of it. Because
Hmm. Hmm.
if
Hmm.
it's not working, then
Yeah.
something about the way I think, feel, or behave, or the way my
Hmm.
body
Hmm.
functions is going to misfire or misfunction out. It's not going to work properly. And
Hmm.
so, but I think too, to um, the point that in terms of you and I looking at things spiritually and from
Hmm.
that lens, one of the things that I endeavor to do is to help people with identity from a place
Hmm.
from a place of, you don't need fixing. Who you are is already whole, complete, and
Hmm.
perfect. Your being is that.
Yeah.
Now your thinking may be jacked up.
Hmm. Yeah.
you know,
Right. Right.
it may be a little twisted or sideways,
Yeah. Right.
or
Right.
your brain may not function properly, but you have a brain. You're not your
Hmm.
brain. You have thoughts. You're not your thoughts. You have these things, and while they may need, some adjustment or fixing, whatever term you want to use, if we come from that place that my being is already whole and perfect, but it has to
Hmm.
demonstrate through a human brain, then I think that is helpful to, um, say that, then if I'm damaged, then I'm just eternally damaged,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
eternally irreparable,
Yeah.
right? So then you become and go, oh well, if I'm already whole and complete, then what is it that I need to make adjustments in or heal?
Hmm.
Um, such as whatever emotional wounds or physical wounds or other woundedness that I experience. Let me heal that, like you would heal a broken leg, in
Hmm.
order so that who I am is this, you, as I like to say, unique, wonderful spirit, can
Yeah.
have the greatest demonstration through my physical body and into
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
physical experience. So I think particularly to the simple genius of also what you do by going to the barbershops, is that's where we have a lot of conversations with each other
Hmm.
about many things, right?
Hmm.
About us as individuals, about us as a community, about this country, about our experiences here in this country. So to me, it's again, its brilliance is in its simplicity and where the conversations
Hmm.
are already happening.
Yeah.
So how do you, um, then utilize that pre-existing, setting, and I call it structure, and the conversations are already happening. How do you
Hmm.
do that in order to then, let's take things deeper, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's
Hmm.
let's 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 really kind of go into some of those wounds and spaces and places that people oftentimes want to avoid because it is too painful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you do that?
I think the two things are happening when I'm in the room because they know me as a doctor, as a therapist. So I do think that there is something about, and again, for me, the expertise isn't rooted in the the academy so much, right? The training, but I have spent my life studying things and reading things, not even just for like in school, but like just exploring the human condition and spending time cultivating and practicing. And so I think that gives me a sense of comfort facilitating conversations that can go deeper than others, right? And the barbers are in there recognizing that they are operating as lay therapists
Yes.
without that training. And again,
Hmm.
I always want to make sure the training is not necessarily licensed, right? Not necessarily American, European centered. It don't have to be that, but it's got to be some type of study,
Right. Wisdom
right? It's
is
got to,
not licensed.
yeah, yeah, that's right, right. It's experienced, but it's got to be intentional. I think that you can go to the library and read all the same books that I read and spend time in your community cultivating a skill set, right? And so that's happening in the barbershop, and the men and the women that are cutting hair know that they have people that come regularly, and there's a space where they can speak and talk, and that they are having to guide them through and listen carefully and give advice when needed. But what they also recognize that they also are going through their own stuff and
Mhm.
that they have limited capacity to be able to really like go there sometimes. And so when I'm in the room, it allows them to have the conversation that they normally have, but it gives them another layer of comfort to really like relax into the emotions, into some of those difficult places that they may have avoided earlier. And I genuinely am comfortable going there. Like I really am. Like I don't get frazzled. Like I don't. Right. So that is something that I recognize as a gift, as a talent, as something that's been cultivated, as a skill set. And the thing that I lean on the most when I do it, to help what you described, I think is a really powerful approach to the creating a non-judgmental space to lead with you are whole, you are perfect, and that there's an aspect of how you move in the world that maybe could be adjusted. It just removes this shame that I think people move around with, this guilt that I'm broken, I'm doing it wrong, and they just have stuck like that. So one of my approaches in order to get around that judgment while balancing sort of this expert position that I hold in the room is to lead with transparency. Like I talk very much about me still being on a journey and things that I'm still working towards and struggling with, and my own contradictions and those kind of things. And so if I do that well enough, it allows permission for the other men in the room to be like, well, he can't judge me because he just told me about his stuff. And so now I can really feel free to be in the space where we are just trying to figure it out together. I have some things that I have some comforts and capacities and so relative expertises in, but so do you. And so we were able to bring those into the room and use those to support each other in a way that I think people want. I think people are ready for. I think that this idea that there's a stigma that Black men want to hold our secrets, or there's places that we don't want to go. That has not been my experience. It's been my experience that they want more. Every time I do it, they're like, when is the next one? I think that people are wanting, I think that there's a natural pull towards excellence and aspiring to be our best self. And then we kind of get in the way of it. And the environment doesn't allow the space for it. But I think that if we create it and make it non-judgmental, make it safe, and make them feel like they're capable of doing whatever it is that their heart is desiring. We just got to do some work. What I've seen happen over and over again is that if we do it, then it happens.
Right. So to, what, to your point, I think that um really it's not that that people don't really want to um share their experiences and share their pain. Really, I think the larger issue is they don't want to be ridiculed for
That's
doing.
right. That's it. That's it.
Right. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to be dehumanized. They don't want to be,
Hmm.
said that you're weak. and
hmm
there's something, something wrong with your character, and the
And I think
problem.
it's even deeper than that for the field. I think that people have a legitimate fear of punishment, losing job, right now being canceled.
Mm.
Um, historically, the
And
social
when you
work
say
field,
cancel, what do you mean by canceled?
I mean the social media way of it. So if you say something wrong right now, people would throw you away. You are no longer of use if you don't say the right thing, if you expose too many of your flaws. And it makes it so that people kind of tiptoeing around
Hmm.
what am I supposed to say and when, which just destroys authentic conversation. Um, and so it's not even just being ridiculed or judged. It's really just like it's really losing jobs, having your children being taken from you, right? You say the wrong thing, it shows up in court, right? I think that it's the fear of consequences that keeps people stuck. And I think that's real. I think that's something we should really actually be mindful of for real. It's not even a fake fear.
No, it's not a fake fear. And so here's the other thing too. Let me give a different context.
hmm
When you write something, obviously it's there, it's written.
Yeah.
So you can say the person wrote this.
hmm
Now, even what somebody is writing, of course, is open to interpretation
For sure.
because of what it means to you versus what it means to me.
hmm
I think the also the larger issue though is, and I share with people, I think one of the most valuable aspects of my training is that, as a psychiatrist, I was taught, don't make assumptions that what someone is saying to you means the same to them as it does to you.
Sure.
Ask questions, and just ask a clarifying question. In my experience, unfortunately, overwhelmingly, people tend to make assumptions.
hmm
You can say something that's literal and factual,
hmm
and out of their woundedness, they'll turn it into something else, or out
hmm
of their experiences or their perspectives, their beliefs, they'll
Yeah.
turn it into something else that wasn't even said.
hmm hmm
Wasn't those actual words weren't said.
Yeah.
There's not the implication of that. It's just that that's your interpretation, or in some cases misinterpretations of
hmm
what's being said, and rather than um, saying, well, let me check to see if my conclusion is correct,
hmm
they just assume that their conclusion is correct and then act upon
hmm
that. So
Yeah.
I think that's the other part that comes
hmm
into it, that even if, again, we're not even talking about something written, but you can just be speaking, saying something, and
But
it gets
written adds another element though. When you write it down, particularly now, people are going back and digging up old tweets. You
correct.
could have written something a decade ago, don't even see the world in the same way. So it stifles growth. I wrote a book.
Mhm,
I hadn't read my book in years until I did a book club last December with some guys in Massachusetts. I had to reread my book
mhm,
so I could facilitate the book club. And there were things that I wrote in my book that I don't disagree with anymore. I'm having to edit. I'm in the process right now of editing my own book
mhm.
because I can't continue to put out the version of me from years ago that is no longer congruent, right? So I think we're not giving people space to grow,
And
right?
I
And especially when you write it. When you write it down, you get stuck in that thing. And I think the process of life is constantly revision and editing and learning and relearning and unlearning. We don't
Right,
give
if
ourselves
that's if
permission.
that's what your intention is, because for some folks it's
Mm-hmm,
just Groundhog Day. Um,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but for you, and to your point again, because I think the idea of identity is so crucial and fundamental to
mm-hmm,
me. That's not who you were. That was just your perspective. That was your
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
perspective, and because your perspective has changed,
Yeah.
which there should be allowance for your
Mm-hmm,
perspective,
mm-hmm,
because like I said, you have a thought or an idea, but you are not your
mm-hmm.
perspective. So
I've disagreed with things I've said seconds later. I'll say something and
Mhm, mhm,
they be like, well, actually, I don't agree with myself. What I just say is a part of it, right? It's not exactly the full thing because there's so much truth, right? There's so many things, and I think that we simplify things sometimes too much and pigeonhole people, and I think that part of that is because we're looking for a fault. We're looking for to put people in boxes to say right, wrong,
come on, teach. Come
right,
on, teach.
guilty or innocent. I think we have these boxes we want to put people in, and that's what the cancel culture is about, right? You could be, and I've had this in my personal experience. People have had their own lived experience with me,
Mhm.
heard one thing that somebody else said, and then it discounted everything that they personally experienced because there's this pressure to say good, bad, right, wrong, allowable or unallowable, keep or discard. And I think that that rigidity of the way the world is shaped is very, very harmful.
Amen. So it is. What we get so uh, yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that it stems from in part that people are looking for threat,
Hmm.
and again because they're when your identity is so grounded in your beliefs,
Hmm.
then when somebody says something that is against your beliefs, you take it as an attack against you,
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
opposed to it's a disagreement with what we believe and what we think.
Hmm.
And so if you and you know so some folks will come, then they coming from the place of you're attacking me,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I need to defend myself and or attack you in
Hmm.
response.
Hmm.
um as opposed to just it's a difference in ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not, and when I say that, speaking of distortions, I'm in no way saying that that the that ideas are unimportant, because
Hmm.
the truth is what people believe and what they think
Turns
then
into.
is the seed, right?
Hmm.
It's the seed for their feelings
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
fruit of their behavior and their
Absolutely.
results,
And
right?
some of that can
So
be very, very harmful.
absolutely,
People can
absolutely.
do create
Um,
violence from ideas for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but I'm just saying is, again, I think if we could create some distance in terms of really identifying who I am as a being, who you are as a being, that we have a brain, we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have behaviors, we have results, but we are not those things. To me, it creates more space to be able to make changes in those things, and frankly, to be able to accept um, that other people evolve in their
Hmm.
thinking and their beliefs and their feelings and their behaviors, as opposed to
Hmm.
being frozen in time,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So so
And I
again,
think a lot of that also has to do with people avoiding looking at their own stuff too. So
mhm,
as long as I'm pointing fault, looking for who else, because there's this sense that, and I think we get it real young, this idea that part of how we should identify includes being better than other people. And so, I've been judged by people who are not qualified to do so, but for some reason, right? People, I don't know at what level someone needs to think they are perfect enough to judge other people to avoid looking at their own things. And so I think that fault finding has a lot to do with like, as long as I'm saying that you wrong, you guilty, you bad, you canceled, and then it focuses the attention away from someone trying to say, what are you doing? What have you done? What are you good at? Right. I mean, and if we all allow ourselves to just be on this journey, nobody's perfect. Nobody's, has been, no one avoids
no
the
one does it.
harms.
No one does it perfectly.
No one does it perfectly. And once you say that, you're like, what does that even mean? How is that even a possible? Is it even possible to do? Like, what is that that's a false concept in and of itself to do a thing perfectly. It's as complicated and as diverse as being human, particularly in this time, right? There's so many different ways to do it. And they don't have to be right or wrong. They could just be different. It could just be like, I think the animal kingdom figured it out. Just flowers. They're just different. They just smell different, look different, and have different functions. And they can coexist in ways without sort of this competition, this better than, this hierarchy. And I think part of that's capitalism. I think that part of the structure of being alive in this world means that we're competing for what we believe are scarce resources. But all of that is an ideology.
Yes. And so here's also to your point. If I'm, it's two things I say. If your house is dirty, and
Hmm.
I'm talking about your house is dirty, then
That's
I don't
right.
have to focus on my house,
Right. Right.
what I need to do to clean up my house. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's that again is that the benefit, right? Because you and I both know anytime you engage in something and repeatedly, there's a payoff. So that's the
Hmm.
payoff for focusing on you talking about your dirty house.
Hmm.
Is I don't have to acknowledge that my house is dirty, or if I do, I don't have to clean it up because I'm busy focused on you and your
Hmm.
dirty
Hmm.
house. And then, the other part of that, I also try to get people to understand is everyone has their own unique design and purpose.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the problem is when we don't recognize that, then if we're comparing ourselves to something that we were never designed and purpose for,
Yeah.
then you either find somebody inferior or superior.
That's right. Right.
And if you're looking and saying I'm not as good as you because I value that, then I find
Hmm.
myself inferior. If
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
find that again you're different than me, and I don't value that, then of course I find myself superior. And
Hmm. Hmm.
it's really, I tell people, be conscious of the fact that again that everything has its own design and purpose. Since that being
Hmm.
the case, as much as people talk down about the anus, let that
Hmm.
sucker back up and see if you ain't got some problems.
Right. Right.
Because
Hmm.
because your body has all these different systems that it relies upon in order to live. So know your anus is not the same, as your heart.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
doesn't, but it has as vital a role, a
That's
vital
right.
in the sense of that if it backs up, you're either going to end up very sick, and if it's
Hmm.
not cleared, dead.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
it's it's just because it's got the stinky job, and
Hmm.
maybe the job a lot of folks wouldn't want to have, doesn't
Hmm.
mean it doesn't have value and something that's critically important
Yeah.
to uh, to the survival of the organism in that case.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think to your point that is a really important aspect of it, but also because I want to use this
I
to
wonder
kind
if that would
of
translate on a t-shirt. The anus is valuable.
circle.
I don't know. I don't know if the movement is gonna go for that.
Oh yeah,
But no,
well,
your point is the
movement
bow
will go for
the
that,
bowel
right?
movement,
If it ain't
right?
like,
No, it's very, very important. Yeah.
right, right. So, it's not, and as you well know, movement is just important, period, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
blood
That's right.
moving through the body, you don't want it
That's right.
stagnating, and
Right.
everything in you needs to move and it needs to flow. So,
Hmm.
I want to, because I think that, the work that you do is so, critically important, and you do it in a way that is unique and different. So I want to, like, again, kind of come back to, how you engage, men folk, particularly, in the settings of barbershops. And I know you also do drum circles, and just, share some of those other, um, some of those other forums which you utilize this, and how you engage them, with obviously with the thought of, how some of the audience may be able to, maybe do take home an extra tool or two.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, I think the approach is really important. Like the way you go about creating space makes a big difference. And I'm very deliberate about doing things that I enjoy doing that are healing for me and then inviting people to join me. That's really my whole perspective.
Okay.
right? So I like
So-
music.
Okay.
If I go into a room with charts and graphs and PowerPoint and lecturing and say, this is what you need to be doing, men would naturally resist that. But if I just play a song and we nod in our head, right, and then print the lyrics out, what you think about that? I ain't got to call it therapy. I don't have to use a doctor. This is
Hmm.
me, Obari,
Hmm.
listening to a song I found
Hmm.
and saying, I just wanted to share this with you. What y'all think about this?
Hmm.
Right? That the approach. There's drums in the room. I don't even have to introduce the drums. If you put drums in a room, ask men to come into that room, they will sit around and will start tapping without saying a word. There was somebody will start tapping. And what I love to do is just take that natural tap that happens and create a rhythm around that in real time. And now we drumming. We ain't said that. Ain't nobody introduce themselves. I haven't said, hey, I'm Dr. Cartman. This is right. We just sitting in a circle, creating space to build community using practices that were viciously, violently removed from us because there was a historical enemy that realized how medicinal they were. And so, as the therapists, as the healers now, I believe that we got to put those things back front and center into the healing space to bring back the language, the songs, chants, the movements, the breathing, those things that we've been doing for centuries, right? We've been doing this for a long time. And then went to school to get trained in the modality to then go back to the neighborhood to impose some other framework and philosophy on people. And I don't think that works. And so for me, the approach is to just bring the stuff that people are already doing. I've had spades therapy, right?
Oh,
For
wait, wait, you got wait,
basketball,
you got to tell me about the spades therapy. I want to hear. I want to hear about
so it's
that.
that you got it's guys.
Uh-huh.
The format is already there. You got
Uh-huh.
guys sitting. There's four people to a table.
Uh-huh.
They're playing. They're
Text
talking.
Obari.
That's right, right. All you do is introduce someone. And so when I did it, there were questions at the table they were responding to while they were talking. And
And
it's really just
anybody,
that.
wait a minute, I was gonna say anybody listening, spades is a card game, right?
Yeah.
That you're playing with a partner. I was trying to think of what's something else that spades is kind of like.
Bid whist.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So yeah, spades is like bid whist. So card
mhm,
game, and so what you play with a partner. So it's basically a team against another team.
yeah.
Okay.
So anything that people love to do, I think you
Right.
can transform it
But
into.
it's so particularly I'm interested, and I just
So
wanted
that
to
was it. It was a very simple format. So we were
uh,
playing spades. They
uh-huh,
knew it was a wellness event. They know I'm a psychologist, and so they expect a certain, you know what I mean. So all I did was introduce questions that were at the table where they were sort of thought provoking, critical thinking, emotional intelligence. So there's someone going around helping facilitate them going through a list of questions. So instead of talking shit and competing, they were
uh-huh.
like, okay, well, we sitting here. So it's the
So
format
like
is really
what
this.
kind of questions?
They were specific to that. It was a group of it was at a college, and so there was some things that are going on at campus. So it was stuff around like, what do you do? Take care of yourself, right?
Okay.
When conflict comes, what are some things that you leaned on? What are some things that you need? Um, what are some ways that you can support your brothers receive support? Those kind of stuff. Just like
Okay.
therapeutic. I mean, it could be anything, but the thing that makes the difference is that they're engaged in something that does not feel off-putting. Doesn't feel like I have to go outside of myself. I'm just doing something it's fun. It's already. I was playing around with the idea of partnerships and competition, and just looking at what does it mean to communicate well, and how do you communicate verbally, non-verbally, those kind of questions. And people got into different questions, and they could choose, and they were adding their own questions. Once you get the ball rolling, they're talking about those things anyway. So you just kind of shift the focus from competition and winning, and what I mean, to connection and partnership. And I think that people will go there if you lead them in that direction. I do with basketball. I use a lot of hip hop. Um, Food is always a good connector. Um,
Say yes, yes,
so
yes.
yeah, but it's the things you do the things that people love to do, and then make it therapeutic. I think we should do more of that.
Yeah. And
Theater is good for storytelling.
mm,
Book clubs, literacy is good. Open mics are good. Um, what else have I used? Those are kind of things that I think have been most successful around getting men to engage. You put a flyer out, say, "Hey guys, come talk about your feelings." They don't come to that. They'll come to it. They'll come to a spade. It can say spades and wellness. They'll come, but just because it has the hook, basketball, and mental health,
uh-huh.
drum circle. I mean, they'll come to if the hook is something that they're interested in. They'll come. They won't come just to talk.
Right. And and you and I have had the conversation before where when I was learning this about men from you,
Hmm
and you said to me, you said that really when it comes to those kind of sensitive, heartfelt issues, that men don't like to necessarily talk eye to eye. And I was like, oh,
hmm
that's just, I said, oh, that's just like, when in terms of my child training, right? Doing child
hmm hmm
adolescent training. So like you said, if I might take one of the kids out, we go shoot some hoops. And while we
hmm
shoot
hmm
hoops, that was our therapy session while we shoot hoops, we were,
Yeah,
talking
that's right.
about things. So,
Absolutely. hmm
yeah. So, and I was like, oh, okay. It's like that. They don't like to
hmm
talk eye to eye. Why,
hmm
why is that?
Um, I know for me, the thing that I'm aware of, and it might be different for a woman, but I'm aware of sort of this competitiveness that happens sometimes.
Mm,
And it depends. Sometimes, men are okay with eye contact, and but there's something about intimacy that sometimes some men are uncomfortable with.
mhm,
That if they're doing it if it's on the side or if it's not like really directly engaged, because we're just not in the practice of having deep emotional conversations and articulating ourselves. And so it helps avoid some of the anxiety and some of um, the avoidance that I think that is a part of male culture just by like easing our way into it. Um, and some men are fine. Like sometimes it works, but I give people space to process on their own, even when we're in a room, to not feel like they're being judged and watched and evaluated and supervised. I think men have a lot of anxiety about that, of being watched. I do. I do. I'm not saying I do, right? There's things that when I'm alone, there's things that I do and say um, that I'm always aware of someone else's eyes and ears. It could be on the phone and somebody
mhm.
else is in the room. I'm aware of what I sound like to someone else. And it's not insecurity, it's more of a self-consciousness. So that's part of that's my own anxiety, right? And then giving men space to choose to engage however they want, but not assuming that sort of the deep, intimate connections, particularly with other men, is immediately comfortable for them.
Right. And so as you were talking about that, then what came to mind is what you actually kind of just ended there with is the fact that I obviously when there's eye to eye contact,
Hmm
either I'm friendly with this person, and if
hmm
I am, then that you're establishing that connection that is a deep, more penetrating,
hmm
you know, um, seeing into me, seeing into my soul, that
Yeah,
intimacy, allowing you to see into me,
yeah,
intimacy.
yeah.
And again, do I feel safe enough with you for that
hmm
to happen?
hmm
Uh, on the other hand, there is if the first alternative is not true, then are you a threat
hmm
on
hmm
some way or another? And again, even competition, right?
hmm
Is it a competition? Because that I make an eye contact is going to be
hmm
one or the other,
hmm hmm
you know,
hmm
friend or
Yeah,
foe,
that's right, right, right.
connection or threat. So,
hmm
um, so obviously having this conversation with you helps me to understand that on a deeper level as it relates specifically to men,
hmm
because I think women in general find it easier. I'm not
hmm
not saying easy, But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we
yeah.
find it easier because despite uh, the ridicule that women get for being emotional,
Hmm.
because it's attributed to us in terms of our gender,
Hmm.
it's more expected and therefore accepted.
Yeah. And some of
So
that is socialized, right? Whether it's, real or fake. Because we
yeah,
say it,
absolutely. And
we,
here's the
we
thing, but
it's
wait a minute,
real because we made it.
but here's the thing that I say too about this in terms of when it comes to men and emotions. I was
Yeah.
like, you know what, y'all need to quit that lie. I
Yeah,
said,
no, I agree.
because men
Hmm.
are really emotional. They're human beings. It's part of
Hmm.
being human is having emotions. But not only that, when you get into these crimes of passion, what the heck is that but
Hmm. That's right.
emotion and rage,
Right, right.
and hurt and whatever. Just
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
emotions on steroids.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
can we please stop telling the lie that men don't have emotions and that they're not ruled by their emotions?
No, I agree completely.
So okay, so you mentioned doing those things that people enjoy doing or that you enjoy doing, which I think is great. And I know, one of the things, and obviously this is for, a more an intimate relationship. I've, just heard in terms of, as a woman talking to, your mate, that, even if you're just doing things like, like say, rubbing his shoulders or rubbing his head or something
Mhm.
like that, that's creating contact, but also helping to soothe him, can help
Mhm.
facilitate conversation as well. What do you think about that?
Um, I think that could be helpful. Um, Even with that though, I think that what's been most useful, I'll speak for myself,
Mhm.
is no, I'm not gonna say that out loud. I was gonna say something that was gonna get women in trouble. Um, I'm processing out loud, obviously. What I was gonna say is
You
the
in
thing
trouble?
that
You in
helps.
trouble? You in trouble?
I, I was gonna say that my experience, this is my personal experience, is
Okay.
that it is rare for me to feel fully, holistically, completely listened to, period, men, women, otherwise. Um, I often feel like we talk about women. We talk about women. Women are listening with agendas, waiting to respond.
Mhm.
Um, I don't often feel like so the thing that makes it the rare times when I do feel like, okay, she really want to know. Some of that happens through consistency and persistence. That's I pause on persistence because some of that can turn into nagging,
Mhm.
and you can shut off the communication if you are like, no, no, tell me how you feel, tell me how you feel, tell me how you feel, because that can be annoying. But for me, I know that you can ask me how I'm doing or how my day was or whatever it is, and I'll give you a of the boilerplate, just no, it's cool, everything's fine. Response first. And it's easy for me. And I'm used to being in relationships where women don't really actually want to know. They just want the opportunity to talk about their day. I don't know if I can say any of this out loud. But um and so I've been I don't know, I don't know if it's my own training or again my own sort of baggage, whatever it is, but I feel like when I give the easy, quick, empty answers,
Mhm.
that I put the responsibility on her to ask follow-up questions. And it's those follow-up questions that for me trigger, okay, she really wants to know for real. My assumption is easy, light, just get on with the conversation, almost like a superficial conversation. It takes someone asking follow-up questions and remembering what we said to be like, okay, there's something has to happen for me to say, oh, she really wants to hear this. And that doesn't happen often. I often feel like she doesn't really actually want to hear this, especially if we're talking about deeper emotional stuff. Um, and so I often keep stuff and I hold stuff in. And there are a few people that I do talk to that have established a relationship where I feel like we have that kind of exchange and we both really genuinely want to hear about how each other are doing. Um, but it takes a lot of special considerations and circumstances and stars to align for me to feel comfortable doing that. Um, and part of that is just the investment and the work to get it out of me. And so I don't know if I'm speaking for any other men out here, but I know that teeth pulling that y'all hate doing
Mhm,
initially has to be a part of you getting me to a space where I feel like, because it's not that I don't want to tell you,
mhm.
it's different. It's something like, it's more like, I don't think that you really actually want to hear it. You have to convince me that you want to hear more.
So of
It
course
sounds unfair as I'm describing it, but it's what it is.
right. I would add a couple things to that. Um, in order to, I would say, if you want to experience the wonder and awe of this moment, then you have to fully inhabit it. In order to fully inhabit it, um, past experiences with other people, um, we want to leave that out of the moment as much as possible because who I am is not that other person. And I think it's one thing if we come to something and speak from a deeper place and the person is not responsive to it, as opposed to assuming the default is nobody really wants to hear, my deep feelings. So I think that's one thing that there needs to be the intention for, and I'll make it personal. It needs to be an intention on my part to be known as much as there's an intention on your part to know me, and vice versa. And obviously, in seeing that or experiencing, if it's not happening, then have some conversation around that. But just the default is nobody wants to know me, and then having somebody else have to work to get to know you because that's a default belief. I think that's one of those barriers, to deeper connections in relationship. The other thing is one of the men folk in my village shared with me when he was younger that he would um, be so enraged with his experiences as an African American man in a business environment that, when his mate would ask him about his day, he wouldn't want to talk about it. And even though she, was asking and asking repeatedly to really hear and know what was going on with him, then he wouldn't talk about it. So I was going to say that's the caution I would exercise in those cases. Here's the thing, I get that we don't always want to talk about something in a given moment.
That's true,
But,
for sure.
but what I'm also saying though is, but we can't say nobody wants to get to know me when we're creating barriers to them getting to know us, kind of, especially as a default. And I just want to bring up one other thing because
Go ahead.
I just want to bring
Yeah,
up
yeah.
one other thing, which is because you said something else important, um, in the barbershop um, session that I attended with you recently, and that was you were talking about again how the language men use versus the language that women use, and how you all just want to say it how it's true for you, but with us and our delicate sensibilities, we don't always want to hear it that way. So I just wanted
Mhm.
to raise that one too.
Sure. The barbershop, that's a great example. I'm share observation that I noticed at that barbershop now. When we started, it was just men
Mm-hmm.
in the room. Um, and I noticed the shift in the level of comfort and openness that men had as more women entered the room. And I don't want to say took over the conversation, but the women were so their presence was so felt that I had to pivot as a facilitator to adjust the conversation to talking about the relationship between men and women. Um, but what I noticed very, very obviously was that the men started to shrink a bit in the room. There were men that were very open and talking, and then when the more women talked, the less men talked. And not even just because of the time and space, but like just I think that default kicked in. And we're used to, I'm used to like when women come, you just, you sit back and you listen and you yes, and you were respectful. Um, but that's why I cherish men only spaces because I see that happening so often,
Mhm.
right? When there's things that we say that we talk about, that as soon as the woman enters the room, there's a switch that goes off. Part of
Yes.
that switch is say the right thing, say it in the right way, don't get in trouble. There's a sense of if I say the wrong thing, I might get in trouble. I don't know if it's come from my mothers or partners, or I don't know where it comes from, but there's a default setting that happens that the who the women in the room shapes how we respond to that sort of instinct. Um, and there are certain women that come to a room that you would notice, and after a while, right, you get back to just having the man talk. But in that room, there was a couple of women that you were one of them, but like it felt like y'all were so excited to have an audience of men, and it was encouraging. The things that y'all were saying were encouraging, they were useful, but it changed the dynamic of the room, right? And so I think that's what that I think that dynamic I think happens in individual conversations too, where we're aware of the presence of a woman, and part of the default is to just be quiet and nod and smile. And I think y'all lose. I think y'all lose from that because there's things that y'all don't get to hear from us when you speak and your presence is respected in a way that is beautiful, but also sometimes limiting in the conversations that we're having.
And to your point, I think the other thing I thought about too is that sometimes, and I've been said this. A friend of mine probably said this to me over 20 years ago, and I'm probably still just really, really getting it. And he said to me, he's like, "Balin, you idle faster than some people can run." And so
Hmm.
the me and so the idea also too is sometimes as women we process things faster than some men, and then also we talk more, so that combination I think you
Process out loud. You
um
process out loud things faster. There are men that are processing things, but we're used to, and maybe designed to do it internally in a way that
yes,
is
but
different. And so
but
that shows up.
right, but there's also sometimes literally though there's the factual literal processing speed, and and I'm
Hmm.
gonna be honest with you, I'm really having to been wrestling with this for such a long time myself personally. Really, when somebody's psychological testing came to me that I was reviewing, that was a patient, and the word
Hmm.
processing speed suddenly hit me in terms of, oh, you would think that I would know better as a psychiatrist, but
Hmm.
that's literal, that's factual.
Yeah,
People
sure.
process things at different rates. And so I think that's a contributor too. Like you said, some things we do more internally, some more externally. So uh, that being said, we are um coming to a close here on this, I think really um, insightful, most helpful, conversation. And so I want to, say no, that we will continue, and again, let's do this again. But in the meantime, tell me about some of the in the last couple minutes, what's some of the events that you have coming up? How do people connect with you?
Mm.
Because you do some great work, um uh in the community. And again, I think that you are a gift and a joy, and such just such this calm healing presence that you bring to
Thank you.
spaces.
There's always stuff coming up. So the best way to keep up is Instagram. I have an Instagram page at Cartman 1. Um, we have a free weekly men's yoga, comedic yoga Mondays. So that's constantly happening. In April, there's a couple of events. There's a child abuse prevention event. There's a relationships communication stepping event that we're doing, a workshop in April. Um, the alcohol substance misuse conversation we're doing. We have a spiritual wellness series. We'll be doing another one of those in April. So there's always stuff. So the best way to keep up is, the Instagram page for me or for the Black Psychologist is at Chicago Black Psychologist on Instagram. But there's websites too, so drobaricartman.com or chicagoblackpsychologist.com. So those would be the best places. Or Facebook too. Just put my name in there.
Yeah. So of course I want to thank you for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
As you are so welcome. And again, I deeply appreciate you sharing your healing presence and wisdom
Thank you.
on the platform today, and look forward, of course, continue to do so as we move forward. And yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today in the sweet spot. Share, follow, and like us on social media. To learn more, please visit balinadermd.com, spelled BALINADURRMD.com. Join us next week, and remember, when you heal your mind, all things are possible.